We'll go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone to today's Max Minutes. We appreciate your taking the time to spend your Friday morning with us. My name is Kevin Shea. I'm president of the Georgia Economic Developers Association, or GEDA, and as also a board member for MAX, the Metro Atlanta Exchange for Workforce Solutions. Today, it's my pleasure to serve as your MAX board host. Before we start the program, I would like to thank and acknowledge our anchor investors for MAX: WorkSource Georgia, WorkSource Metro Atlanta, the Georgia Department of Human Services, Metro Atlanta Chamber, Goodwill of North Georgia, First Step Staffing, and the Bobby Dodd Institute, or BDI. Now I would like to pass this along to fellow board member Daniela Perry, Vice President of the Georgia Chamber Foundation, who will introduce our speakers for today. Daniela?
Thanks so much, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. We're so excited. We've got a really great panel this morning, so I'm going to Kathryn Cramer to introduce her fellow panelists and get us started. Over to you, Kathryn.
Thanks, Daniela. Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathryn Cramer, the Chief Community Impact Officer for TechBridge, and I'm excited to invite two special guests to our Max Minutes presentation this morning. So first, we have Kathryn Lawler, who is the Executive Director of the Atlanta Regional Collaborative for Health Improvement, or affectionately we call it ARCHI. And we have Beavor, who is the President and CEO of Georgia Center for Nonprofits. And you all know at TechBridge, we are passionate about data sharing and care coordination and helping determine predictable pathways out of experiencing homelessness and poverty. And Karen and Kathryn have been meeting regularly every week during the pandemic to really focus on how can we improve care coordination from the ground up in Atlanta. And so we wanted to share today the work that we're doing today. So I will have Kathryn Lawler start us off, and she will introduce a video that ARCHI produced.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure to be with you here this morning. And I am excited to share this. So let's get it started. Here we go. And as Karen mentioned, we are part of a team of organizations to a little bit later about actually how that team is growing significantly, who are very committed to exploring in this moment now how we might both support critical organizations who are delivering much needed care, but very importantly, their desires and mission around supporting holistic, person-centered care, but also a real recognition that as we support and hold people in this time of crisis, but also hopefully begin to recover, that if we don't change the way services are delivered, we know that a lot of our historic inequities will continue to persist, and that recovery will not be even for many people. And so this is a commitment to recognize how much hard work people are doing right now on the ground to get essential services out, but also keeping an eye to, a spotlight on, and putting some energy and ultimately building a movement around how we might change the way services are delivered today in order to impact better outcomes, but also to begin to address some of the historic patterns that we're all anxious to disrupt in our community. And so we put together a short animation to sort of talk about what it is like now and invite people to be a part of the change for the future. So let me share that with you now.
Good health requires more than health care. Quality education and jobs, affordable housing, safe communities, and access to healthy food are essential to health and well-being. Atlanta has resources, yet many of our health outcomes lag behind parts of the United States and the world. Why? Because it's far too difficult for far too many to access what they need to be healthy. The burden of navigating disconnected services falls on the person in need. If Bethany needs help with rent, she might have to apply to 5 or 6 different agencies before getting aid. But Bethany also needs support for food and after-school care for her kids, and an appointment to monitor her diabetes, and, well, The cycle of applications and eligibility starts over again for each. Even if Bethany manages to break through all these barriers, she still may never actually connect to the services she needs. Health is only achieved when socioeconomic factors are stabilized. But the path to getting there requires too much from those in greatest need. The challenges are even greater for Black people and people of color in our community. There's a better way. We must invert the burden away from those in need. When the person or family in need is at the center, processes are designed to meet their needs. Administrative work for agencies that deliver care is reduced and streamlined. And Bethany can stop chasing down the services she needs and focus on stabilizing her life and her family. We design the system we have. We can redesign it, and we must start by meeting people where they are, coordinating care, and inverting the burden. Join us as we work toward a brighter, healthier future. Good health requires more than health care. Quality education.
Going. I apologize. I'm seeing a message that some of you had some trouble seeing the video, and I apologize about that. I don't. When you get Zoom to work once, it doesn't seem to want to do it the same. Karen, was it could you see any of it, or should we try again, or just keep moving? Tell me.
I think we could see most of it, Kathryn, but maybe you want to stop sharing, try and reshare again and see if the box goes away, because it's still there on your screen.
Oh, that's so odd. Any better?
Still there.
Mm.
Do you want me to try and share from my screen?
Yeah, I think since we shared the video, we could just do it from yours then.
Okay.
I apologize. And yes, we can share with you the video, but and I apologize. That's very frustrating. What it does though is try to talk a little bit about how challenging it can be for people who are actively trying to seek services and supports. And that it really is a systems issue. It's very often understood as a personal problem or a challenge, but it is essential to thinking about how we're going to not just get services to folks, but how we might really move them to a place of stability and thriving. And so we're delighted to share it with you, and more importantly, get your feedback and thoughts, because one of the things we want to talk with you all about today is how these same issues are experienced from the workforce perspective. This is just a diagram of how often that same problem is experienced from the perspective of the individual. And then we call it a community health worker, but it's just recognizing that this maze, this we affectionately call the spaghetti drawing, but it is a very complicated situation, and you can see all the kinds of challenges and roadblocks that emerge, whether it's around eligibility, accessibility, administrative burden. But we wanted to just hold up that this is not only a mess for the people who are seeking care, it's incredibly time-consuming and inefficient for the individuals who are helping people seek care, whether you call them a community health worker or a navigator or a coach or whatever that role is called. The next slide, again, looks at the same issue, really, but from a systems and outcomes perspective. So, you know, if this is what it looks like when people are trying to get service and support, but if most of the time it doesn't actually end service delivery, either folks linger on wait lists, they're ineligible, or in fact, the system has just been a roadblock. There is no ability to get help. Then from an outcomes perspective as well, it's not efficiently getting more people from the left-hand side of the screen to that green box on the right-hand side of the screen, that this isn't necessarily either. These roadblocks are very frustrating, but really make it ineffective. So the next slide starts to ask, how does this fit into the whole system of care? So as we talk about thinking a future system where people are at the center of the system, we want to recognize that when we think about where the level of systems change is, it certainly is, and from the health perspective, we also call this the downstream. So we're talking about delivering services better, more effectively, in a person-centered, trauma-informed, comprehensive way. But just want to acknowledge that as we do that, and even as we aspire to do that very differently, we do have to recognize that causes people to have those needs is part of a larger systemic set of challenges, and that we ultimately, our big vision needs to be not only delivering care better, differently, more effectively, but also continuing to move upstream at some of the underlying core root causes that for our community in Atlanta and across the Southeast also mean that we have to recognize the role that racism and racial inequity play in causing some of the challenges that people experience. So this is just to recognize that there's a whole system at play, even as we talk about coordinating immediate care and needs. And so what is the solution? We are continuing to get ideas, gather everybody who's interested in talking about what could a different system look like. And starting to imagine a community infrastructure that puts people in the center, and not just using that as a powerful phrase, but really starting to re-engineer the architecture of the system from the customer experience all the way through to the way we measure and develop accountability for the care and support that people are receiving, but ultimately, are they getting to the place they want to be? That is that stability, allowing them to have a path to thriving, is the hope and the support for what something could be different. And just to recognize, this is one example, and we'll talk more about this, but that people are trying this all across our Atlanta region now. And in particularly, I'm from Archie, and so we are supporting community resource hubs at both Grady and Mercy Care. And just to give you a sense of the network that we have built there to support patients with unmanaged chronic conditions, and the variety of agencies that have committed to working in a different way, to put people in the center, to do warm handoffs, to do data sharing, so that the individual is able to get all of their needs met in a comprehensive way, but in a way that does not put the burden on them, but inverts the burden of that work back to the system itself, and in a way that drives a better, efficient, and more effective response. So why now? Why should we make this change now? This is a problem that many of you, many of all of us have known has existed for quite some time. But we want to claim that this is a moment that has both been a moment of crisis, but is also a time of innovation. And we have continued to meet with and interview, and we'll talk more with you today, every organization that is interested in this space. And there is such a recognition that agencies need to change, but also a deep concern that we will not emerge from this different, and a desire to overcome that and find a way to get out of this time that we are in a way that fundamentally allows us to address our longstanding inequities. But also, we've been asking why now in a number of ways too. And it is encouraging to see how many assumptions about the way things have always been are starting to change. And that really is an opening and an opportunity that we want to work with as collaboratively as possible across as many systems and agencies as possible, to see how we might take this moment where a number of things have been thrown up in the air, and see how we might re-envision a system together. And then lastly, we feel that this is a critical moment now, because as this next slide shows, there's a lot of great work going on all across our community. Many of you, and we want to add more examples to this list, are already starting to think and work in this way. Very importantly, we see that there are examples where folks are starting to rethink the business model first, and certainly apply technology. They're using data in a different way, and data in a way that isn't just about the funding requirements, but in a way that helps facilitate the care to that person, in a way that eliminates the trauma that seeking care can actually cause for individuals. So it's a wonderful time because we have this momentum and so many great local examples. But at Archie too, we have been doing extensive research for a couple of years now. And the other good news is that several communities across the country are ahead of us. And so there are great models and examples of people who are stepping out and re-engineering their system for great results. And of course, we can steal all their wonderful ideas.
So we wanted to share one of those examples, and we wanted to share work that TechBridge has done in Nashville, Tennessee, with the Family Collective that's led by United Way of Greater Nashville as the collective impact backbone organization. And we first started working with them in June of 2019. And we found that they were using one system and trying to make all of the nonprofits that were a part of the Family Collective use one technology system. The Family Collective is focused on moving families that have been experiencing homelessness to self-sufficiency. And we have been able to grow to 5 counties and 24 nonprofits that are sharing data and coordinating services and helping move families to self-sufficiency. So some of the 24 nonprofits that provide services in Nashville and the surrounding 5 counties are employment, workforce development services, focused on higher education, education completion, financial literacy and financial coaching, housing, whether that's temporary shelters, finding affordable housing in apartment complexes, focused on early childhood education and making sure kids are enrolled in school, and then organizations that are helping these families to build social capital and social connections. And so when we first started, they were trying to have everyone use the same system. A lot of the nonprofits didn't have their own client management system. And so they liked what was built for the Family Collective, but they kept saying, well, we have other programs and services. What can you do with that? And then it just got unwieldy trying to make everyone use the same system. It's really similar to here in Georgia for our homeless continuum of care when we're asking everyone to use Client Track, but what does it really take to move families out of experiencing homelessness? Often it's jobs, but you don't track that information related to workforce development in the homeless management information system. So we've moved to more of a distributed model where every nonprofit in the Family Collective can use the client management system that works well for them and tracks their programs and services. And they can all share data with each other. We developed a common data model in a data lake, a data warehouse where we're aggregating the data. And then one of the big problems we solved for was many of the organizations that provided housing needed to report that data to HUD through the Homeless Management Information System in Nashville Service Point. And so we're solving by the nonprofits can enter data once in their client management system. We're using data integration tools to bring that into a data lake. And then we're creating the HUD Excel spreadsheet that is required for HUD reporting so that the continuum can stay in compliance with HUD mandates, but we're easing, they're not having to do duplicate data entry. And so we've been looking at Atlanta and all the different systems that are in play. Kathryn and her team did a presentation today, this week, and we had 18 organizations surveyed, and they were using 45 different technology systems in Atlanta. And so we know it's possible to take those client management systems, integrate them into a data lake with a common data model for the data that we do want to share with each other. And then also meet reporting for Client Track, our homeless management information system in Atlanta, and also meet funder requirements. So when Kathryn and her team surveyed the different nonprofits, they were finding on average, they're using 3 different systems, and often because that's funder mandated. And so if we had a common data lake, we could have all of our funders in Atlanta have a login, and they could see if they're the blank foundation, here are my 50 grantees, and here's their aggregate performance. But they could also look and see, how is TechBridge performing? What are their outcomes data? And so we really think this will help with avoiding duplicate data entry, triple data entry, and really make a seamless system for Atlanta where we can really see the care coordination. And so in this system, we're having coordination of services, coordination of a technology, really focusing on interoperability, not making everyone use the same system. And then really person-centered design, no wrong doors, really overcoming barriers to receiving the services they need, really understanding from each other what are different eligibility criteria so that we can best guide service recipients so that they can get access to services. And so we really think Atlanta is ready for this. And we have been sharing with lots of organizations, and there are a lot of organizations that have signed on and said, yes, we are ready for this. This is from the ground up, and this is really inverting the burden both for service providers and service recipients. And so Karen Beavor is going to share about our committed partners to date and the work we've been doing together.
Yes, thank you, Karen. We have really been working hard, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, meeting weekly every Wednesday. We call it our Wednesday morning club throughout the entire COVID experience, and working very hard to engage a lot of partners. So as you can see on this slide, we have a number of different partners that have actually signed commitments to work on this program. And it involves understanding kind of the values within which we will be working, and also some of the kind of what we call guardrails of how we will work together. And so a lot of these organizations are ones that you're probably familiar with, everybody from the Atlanta Community Food Bank to childcare to senior food provisioning and housing and health. And so it's a great group of committed partners. So this is an example of the agreement that we worked on for those partners. So we're really working on equity and equitable access to services. And so we, again, Kathryn kind of mentioned this at the beginning, but this is really person-centered, which means we're putting the client at the center. That we need to address needs holistically by coordinating these services across the agencies, streamlining and access and eligibility criteria, reducing administrative tasks and duplicative data collection and entry. It has to work for the clients, but it also has to work for the caseworkers. And we're very, very clear about that organizations leadership can decide to do this, but if it does not work for the caseworker, it will not work for the client, and it will not work at all. And so we're really very focused on making sure that it works for organizations, the caseworkers, the people that they serve. And we need to be able to co-design and regularly evaluate this by the actual users of the system. So we're engaging the people that are actually using the system in its design, but also in its evaluation ongoing. We need to make sure that there is predictability, that when we do those warn handoffs, that they are actually done, and that the resources at the end of that handoff are literally there for that person who needs them. And so no longer are we interested in making just a informational referral and leaving people to the the vagaries of whether money is still existing there for rent assistance, or food is there, or the actual services are open on the day designated. So we are really making the shift, and I think that's what this commitment is about, from reaction to proactive work with one another. And so that is what we are trying to do, is build these relationships and accountability that is supported by technology, not necessarily led by technology. And Kathryn?
Yep, I can just offer here too, and in addition to what Karen said, we are inviting anybody who wants to join and sign their organization's name to that statement that you believe the same things and want to work in that way. So that's one of the things we can follow up if anybody is interested on this call. But San Diego is one of those many communities that are a bit ahead of us, have been thinking about this, and we've had the opportunity to study in depth what they have done. And just to sort of ask the question, where will this new system get us? What could we expect out of a different way of working? And this is just a chart they put together. Ultimately in Atlanta, we can develop our own, but it does a nice job of looking at the outputs, sort of some of the immediate opportunities that a more coordinated system can deliver. You see that at the bottom, some of the value that could be created there. But also starting to drive towards outcomes. So how we could build a system to have these kind of expectations that we are changing the way that we work, but also getting to better overall health and well-being for our community, individuals and our community. And then finally, they've articulated the impact they're looking for. So looking at that longer term impact. And we just share this to say that it certainly is their vision and their expectation of what their system will create. And we have the opportunity to do something very similar here. And so next, we just wanted to talk about how we plan to get started. And luckily, as we mentioned, there's lots of great work underway that can be supported. But the Georgia Center for Nonprofits also started to build a platform on which ideas like this can grow. And we asked Kathryn to share a little bit more about that and how we might be able to utilize it to support this kind of innovation as well.
Yeah, and thanks, Kathryn. Briefly, as you can see, there are a lot of partners and there will be a lot of donors and there will be a lot of stakeholders. And so it really needs a neutral ground in which to operate. And so the Georgia Center for Nonprofits has started something we call the Center for Social Transformation. It is a neutral spot where design and transformation can take place. And the whole objective around it, as this slide articulates, is to empower positive disruptors in the nonprofit ecosystem. We want to create transformative solutions to issues that hold people and communities back and down. So there are several aspects to it. What we're talking about here today is what we call a design lab. It's a focus lab that attacks a specific solution, like the shared services, for example, which has a primary design lead, Archie TechBridge, and it organizes all of the work in a neutral spot in a lab, and has project management and other kinds of resources, money, et cetera, that help it move forward. So it also will include accelerators, learning labs, ecosystem management, et cetera. But what we're talking about today is what we consider a design lab. And so we're really pleased to see this working and hopefully moving forward. So as you can see on this slide, Archie and TechBridge are the lab leaders, and we are supporting it with this neutral concept called the Center for Social Transformation and all of the capacity and project management and others that it needs, along with Archie and TechBridge, I might add. We're not the only one doing that. So we wanted to ask a few questions, and so I'll turn it back over to Kathryn Cramer to kind of lead this slide.
Thanks, Kathryn and Kathryn. So we really enjoyed sharing with you all today, but we are also here because we wanted to get your feedback and we had some questions for you. So we wanted to hear from you all. We talked a lot about how care coordination can happen with health services, social services, for the homeless continuum of care. But we wanted to hear from you all about the workforce development ecosystem. Where do you think that there are opportunities for more collaboration and care coordination in our workforce development ecosystem? And so feel free to unmic and share your thoughts with us.
Hey, Karen and Kathryn and Karen, this is John Helton. Hope that you all are well. Thank you all for doing this. And Kathryn, I probably owe you an apology more than anybody on this, is for not having been involved as I would like to have been to date, simply because of bandwidth and ability to be there. But thank you for this opportunity today to bring it to Max and to solicit some feedback. And, you know, to your first question about more coordination in workforce development ecosystem, I think, and one of the things we're working on at Career Rise, and we need to talk, we've got to find the time and make the time to talk and connect to this particular effort, because we're really looking at access to opportunities. And it really comes from the premise of that often quoted, I think it was Layla Jana, who said that talent is evenly distributed, but opportunities are not. So how can we better help people access at the very beginning, have an understanding of appropriate resources and opportunities for people to access. And we have some specific work in this area that I think could dovetail nicely into what you all have just so beautifully built out here in terms of the conceptualization. So access for me and making good matches, and really what oftentimes happens is that when we are recruiting for programs, we're recruiting for that program, right? And sometimes that ends up with square pegs being put into round holes. And to, how might we create a system that really is person-centered and really has a good solid understanding of what the person's needs and desires and skills and abilities to quickly, from a workforce development perspective, get into an opportunity and be successful at that opportunity. So looking at some type of resource that could be provider agnostic and program agnostic, and really flip the script on that and be a person-centered model, as opposed to, us recruiting for our next best, greatest program, which may be wonderful, but it may not be wonderful for a particular person. So I would think that's one piece of it. And then, of course, we have so many wonderful workforce development programs in our Metro Atlanta ecosystem, but how do we support people along that pathway? And I think what you all are working on and have developed to date is something that, really speaks to the supportive needs of people that are trying to do better and to be able to access and participate in and be successful in workforce development programming. Thank you.
John, thank you so much. I think access is so important, and we would love for there to be no wrong doors in workforce development. And, I think, like you said, many nonprofits and job training programs are recruiting students for their programs, but what if it isn't the right fit? And so say someone comes to Urban League and it's not the right fit for their programs, can they refer to Perscolas? Or if someone comes to Perscolas and they're not a right fit for IT, could they go to Construction Education Foundation of Georgia and it be a better fit for them? And who are those mutual and objective conveners that can really look at our unemployed and underemployed residents and look at their aptitude and their skills and their experience and help do that matching and say, yes, you'd be a great fit for these programs. Often now it's just, well, here's the programs we have available. And so better matching could really improve care coordination in our workforce development ecosystem. Thank you. How about somebody else? How else can we improve care coordination in workforce development?
Hey, Karen, I just wanted to share, I know Faye Vincent in the chat said that streamlining processes for people with limited resources and skills is extremely beneficial for success. I'll say too, I know from the Georgia Chamber's perspective, we've seen this, again, getting folks in the door, you want them to have clear pathways so that they're able to really continue on a path of success and kind of build that confidence as you move forward, rather than kind of getting those roadblocks, getting discouraged and then giving up altogether. So I think that was a great point that Faye brought up. I just wanted to share that from the chat. So feel free to post in the chat too if you don't want to be chatty this morning.
Thanks, Daniela. Faye, absolutely. Yes. Streamlining our processes, having common intake forms, common documentation that we require, so it's easier for our residents to access services. Absolutely.
Yeah, I hope we will continue to get questions, so I don't want to crowd out anybody, but I just wanted to reiterate what you're saying, Daniela and Faye too. So we have done some pretty preliminary interviewing with individuals who are actively seeking help from a variety of agencies, and it would be our commitment throughout this process to keep doing that, and more importantly, to get individuals with lived experience involved in the actual design process and decision making about the future system. What that has yielded, though, is some really challenging insights, I think, for all of us as people committed to providing support in our community, that that experience of having to navigate and those roadblocks is really detrimental to individuals. And I say, trauma causing, and it really, I think we have to think long and hard about that, about what that does in terms of setting people back when those doors are complicated and close in their face, or there's a procedure, or just getting some of the partners who've signed on to talk about the process of getting your Georgia identification and how demoralizing and frustrating, just that alone. So I just want to hold that out there, that when we bring people into this, we really do hear loud and clear that obviously services and supports are really important, but the way that we deliver them really needs to change if we're going to lift people up and get them to thrive. So thanks for all of those, but I just wanted to bring that little bit of feedback in too.
Kathryn, I think that's such an important point to think, not just from our perspective, but from people that are actually doing this on a day-to-day basis, because I think when we're not looking at that different perspective, it's so easy for us to just get set in our own ways and think about, well, that's an innovative approach. So that, is something that's different and we should try that. But I think, to what John was saying about really making it, focused on individuals and patients and how they're successful, I think having that approach is such an important tool that we all just think through a lot more. So I think that's a great point. What other feedback do we have for Karen and Kathryn and Karen? I think they shared so much good information. I'd love to keep making sure we're able to respond back to.
Hi, this is Angela O'Neill. Thank you all again. I do apologize. I had a conflict, so I did not hear the entire presentation. Thank you for putting the video in the Dropbox. I just wanted to reiterate what was just said regarding a systematic, streamlined process for simple services. One of our clients, which I'm so excited about, he's an ex-offender, but he's been able to, over the years, keep himself going. He's an alumni of our program. And have now connected him with an apprenticeship program for construction. And he does not have his Social Security card. And he has been going round and round to just get his Social Security card. And it was very frustrating for him. Something that seemed so simple was kind of difficult. So I think one thing, as you mentioned, that could be considered is how do we create a systematic, streamlined way for basic needs that clients may have, ID card, Social Security card, any other things that they may need that will not hinder them from moving forward in their workforce process. So, and I don't know if that means creating a specific team of people from each entity that we can go directly to be able to move forward quickly versus having the clients themselves try to go and figure it out. I'm not sure, but I do believe that will really be a way to help our clients not lose hope, and also allow us to be able, as agencies, more effectively provide our services to them. So thank you for that comment. I just wanted to add that piece.
Thanks, Angelia. We want to look at our clients as whole people and make sure all their needs are being met. And like you shared, your client's a returning citizen and they are enrolled in an apprenticeship program for construction. And, we would celebrate that and say that's a win, but just helping them to get their Social Security card is so important and get the basic needs met. And so that is a great example of how we can have better care coordination and workforce development. What other services do they need? How do we connect them with other organizations that can help them get those basic needs met? Thank you so much for sharing.
Hi, Karen. This is Julie Nooner, your friend from TechBridge. Hi, everybody.
Hi, Julie.
I am the Chief Program Officer at TechBridge and work closely with Karen. And this is a project that I've been close to in Nashville, but also lead the technology career program team there. And one of the new themes that we see emerging in how work has shifted as a result of the pandemic is not only the training and then getting someone employed, but people are now working virtually. And so as we've worked with other nonprofit partners that are working to solve homelessness, a new partner that has to be in the conversation at the table is, where do they go to work? They may not have a place that is quiet, where they have good internet services. And so when I think about all of the wraparound services and all the support that traditionally we've had to give, this is a new theme that's emerging, is how are we going to make sure beyond getting the job that if someone, we thought about transportation to get to the job. Well, now is it a WeWork space, or who is going to have a space for people to go to if they, have a family all living in a small place and they don't have a quiet work environment. So it's definitely a new barrier that's starting to present itself in opportunities that we've had to place our students. And it's something that we're still trying to solve for and find the right partners. But I just wanted to throw that out there as a new trend that is emerging as a result of all the work that's shifted to virtual, I think across industries, not just in technology, but many companies that aren't sending their workforce back, but keeping them in home offices.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for sharing. How about others? What are other supportive services that are coming up as you're doing workforce development? What are your needs of your clients that are currently unmet? Or what are barriers that they're having to overcome and obstacles that are in their way?
This is Angela again with Menswear Incorporated. I'm finding that I get a lot of calls for emergency funding to help them if it's with an electrical bill, partial, payment for rent or something like that. But those are other social services that I've noticed have definitely been on the increase for us as far as social services are concerned.
Kathryn, do you want to talk about what we've been learning about people seeking rent utility assistance lately during the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for raising that about the financial aid. I think we're even hearing that, frankly, from some employers as well, that they know that once even people are employed, that this is a growing concern. As we look forward to think about how we might start to build the blocks of a future system and take on the initiatives, this financial aid is really at the front and center, not just because of the pandemic, but it was the dominant need as we have assessed a variety of systems and entry points. It was the dominant need across our community for some time. And it, as you all know, it's a growing issue. So the opportunity for looking at how we can streamline some of that access really is at all levels of where we know that coordination needs to be. And luckily, there were a group of providers under the House ATL umbrella that had been meeting well before the pandemic in their prioritizing communities section, who were already starting to identify how they might change their processes and practices to streamline eligibility and to think about how agencies can better collaborate to meet the needs of a specific individual. So the exciting part is that we have a start on that. And that when we hold up the idea of interoperability rather than uniform technology, it really does lead to real openings and hopefully in the very short term. But it's good to know that that would be helpful to individuals in the workforce system. And I think we're really anxious to see not only how that system can be streamlined amongst the providers of rental and financial assistance, but then how that streamlining allows it to better connect to systems like workforce or healthcare, where those plugs are essentially needed. I also want to reflect on something in the chat because I was going to ask this question, and Shelley, it seems that you have brought it up already about mental health. And I wondered if anybody else wanted to comment on that, because that is something we're certainly seeing in a couple other areas as well, that individuals there's a greater and greater need for mental health services for lots of folks across sectors. So I wondered, thanks Shelley for bringing that up, if you want to talk any more about it, or if others want to comment on if you're seeing that as well.
I was just, we're starting to see it, obviously with the pandemic, we've really seen it, and we do offer that at our agency, but we're seeing that sometimes for people even to go that one step to look for a job, they've got to get beyond some of these mental health issues and need that support first. So like you've said, it just is a continuum and it's constantly evolving. It could be mental health and then suddenly they've lost their job and then they need financial emergency assistance and then they need food and then they need, and then they need back to rent assistance and then they'll get a part-time job. We're starting to do a little bit of support through career services. We are, our staff are not licensed therapists, but we are starting to do some support groups with resilience in looking for a job and trying to do some more support that way as well.
Great.
And I saw that Jack Murphy had raised his hand, so I want to go to Jack next.
Thanks. I wear several hats. I'm employed by the Metro Atlanta Chamber, but I also spend some time with a group I chair in North Fulton that is looking to find to document some of the root causes of need in our area. But most of my experience with this is 10 years with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul, which is sort of a grassroots organization that does pay for emergency services. I'm really excited about this. You've already dealt with the biggest hurdle I've seen around the nation in collective impact projects, which is shared database. So congratulations on that. But to answer this specific question, if you're looking at the total workforce ecosystem, and Shelley and I have talked about this before, service providers don't see themselves as placement systems, placement organizations. Yet we deal with many people that just need better connections. They don't need more training. They don't need more skills. A lot do. They need a vision to see themselves in some of these jobs. If you look at what WIC just did with 20 mothers, single mothers that they put through technology training, those folks didn't see themselves in those jobs to begin with. And so having nonprofits help with that, giving a different sense of hope to people. If you're looking at the total ecosystem, I think is something that that should be on this group's radar.
Jack, thank you for raising that. And I wonder if there's a language or framework that's used on the workforce side. I know from the health and healthcare side, what we often talk about, and by the way, this is not happening everywhere and it needs to be happening more, but the idea of person-centered care focused in a technique called motivational interviewing, which really tries to reorient what is the goals of working with that individual based on how that individual sees them. Example is, someone's been going to their doctor for a long time and they keep telling them to, eat better and exercise, but never deal with the underlying stress that's really exacerbating their hypertension because they're really worried about their daughter and their granddaughter. Then you'll never really get the results on the hypertension because you haven't sort of stood in their shoes and understood the cause from that person's perspective. The community health worker using those techniques really tries to upend that and say, talk about your life. Where are you going? What do you need? And how can we work on that together? And oh, by the way, hypertension gets improved when we deal with those issues. Sorry, that was a bit of a long example, but I just wondered, is there language? Sometimes we're doing the same things in different sectors, or we just call it different things. But it sounds like almost something similar that you're describing is sort of not orienting around, here's the buffet of services I have to offer you. What are you picking from? But let's start with who you are, where you're trying to go. And then the job is to navigate those services to make that that ultimate outcome. Does that resonate with you, or is there a different way? Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's exactly the right approach. And so to me, the question of what do our clients need, what are their barriers, is perhaps not as fruitful of question as what do our service providers need to do that kind of an interview, to have that kind of interaction with somebody in need. It's so that we can reach more people by talking to the people that are paying people's rent and light bills, so that they can execute that model.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
I wanted to make sure everyone saw that I think Roderick mentioned the fact that 24-hour childcare is something that's an important issue, and I think that's certainly true. I did want to kind of share along what Jack was kind of talking about with making sure you're getting the right information from clients. I know like Georgia State University, they've actually used a chatbot, and they found that students will often share information via a chat that they wouldn't share with a person because they're not as comfortable. So I think that's a way to really think about using technology in a different way to get different kinds of results where people may not be as comfortable or may have insecurities about sharing something with a person. That maybe actually be a way to use technology for good. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there as well.
This is Karen. I think I just want to reinforce, because a lot of this this list of services that are auxiliary to childcare, to workforce, It really has to do with a good triage and intake. And part of this whole process is to share the layer of information that is needed for intake at a variety of different organizations so that you can reduce the time of the caseworker and they can spend time on another matter, right? And so if you're not getting everybody's information, same information over and over again, you can pull up the client name with an identifier and you can get the kind of information that you need. If you're a food provisionist versus a healthcare provider, you don't need the same level of information, but you're at least not having to do that step. You can move on to actually spending time. And certainly, as Kathryn Cramer noted, 60% of social work time is now data entry, right? And so if you can relieve some of that, you can spend more of your valuable experienced time doing work for client outcomes and not data entry.
On that same theme, could I ask this group, I think Kathryn mentioned earlier that we had a growing group who actually just met on Wednesday to talk about how to advance these issues. And again, would invite anyone who wants to join us. We can get that statement of support out to Joy. And if Joy, if you would send it out, if your agency wants to lend your support to it. But that conversation, I wondered where you all see the workforce right now. Is that the right word? So that we had a lot of discussion about concern for frontline case managers right now, and kind of the shorthand reference was they're leaving to go to get a job at Chick-fil-A because it's less stressful. So there was this recognition that the system and how hard it is to access and create results is also really impacting those who are doing the work. Certainly the pandemic increased the volume, but there's also just this frustration that, certainly that's reflected in if 60% of the time is dedicated toward these other data entry, but how is the workforce doing? And is there a part of this work that needs to be a value proposition to keep them healthy and doing their best work from your perspective?
We've been hearing a lot about job coaches, case managers experiencing burnout. We've been hearing about high turnover at our organizations. Anyone want to share what they've been hearing in the community and experiencing? And I would just say our work has been focused on inverting the burden for service recipients, but also trying to invert the burden for service providers. And we've been hearing from executive directors, we'll have new staff come in, and when they find out, not only are they serving very vulnerable families and people that have been experiencing trauma, but then they have to enter data into 5 different data systems, and they're just, walking away, that it's too much for them. The burden is too great. Or we've also been hearing the lack of resources and the lack of being able to get people help, worried about people being evicted, worried about people experiencing homelessness and not having a place that they can go that night, and how much that weighs on us when we're providing services. So Kathryn and Kathryn and I have been hearing a lot about that from social services, homeless continuum of care. But if anyone wanted to share, like what's it like in the workforce development space right now?
Thanks, Amelia. I can see in the chat you're offering that is something we have to do a lot more work on, and that you are hearing some of that. So thanks.
And I think maybe our, silence is something that we're all just pondering, how much it is impacting our teams, it's impacting our organizations, it's impacting everything. And I know that so many of our service providers are just pushing through because they know they still have to continue to do good work and help people. I think that the last year and a half has turned everything on its head. And I think y'all have given us a lot to think about to really use this as an opportunity for positive momentum and forward growth. But I think this has been just so invaluable. I know Joy will send out, all of y'all's information and that statement to make sure that folks are able to join and learn more. But I know that we're getting close on time. So if y'all have any closing thoughts, I think we'd love to do that. And then we'd love to turn it over to Kevin Shea. So Karen, Kathryn, any last thoughts for the group?
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And as Kathryn shared and Joy will pass on to you, we would love for you to join our efforts. And I really am so much more hopeful that we can have improved care coordination in Atlanta.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it. Kevin, over to you to close us out this morning.
Very good, Daniela. Thank you very much. I want to first thank everybody. I really appreciate your time and effort this morning. Also to say that I was not a very good host at the beginning of sharing my screen. I hope that you can see the screen now. Earlier, I did not share it, so my apologies. I also want to say that I think I overlooked a couple of our anchor sponsors, such as Atlanta Career Rise and Goodwill in North Georgia. So these are our sponsors. I want to say our anchors. I want to say thank you again very much for them. And thank you very much, Karen, Kathryn, and Karen, for joining us today and leading us in this great and timely conversation about how we can improve coordinated care in Metro Atlanta. I really love the phrase, the mantra of no wrong doors. I think that's tremendous. And hopefully we can put that into practice throughout the workforce community. Thanks also to Daniela for moderating today's discussion and leading our Max Minutes programming. We sincerely appreciate each one of you. So now we're going to wrap up with a few comments, and want to say that most, if not all of you with us today understand the value of being a Max member as you're part of our membership. Here are some words from Max member Jeannie Ross with the City of Refuge about how being engaged in Max has benefited her abilities to assist those she serves. Max is all about strengthening connections, practices, and collaborations among workforce developers and organizations engaged in workforce development. Should any of you know anyone who would benefit from a Max membership, we ask that you help spread the word. And now I have a few announcements. We are looking forward to our next Max Minutes, which will focus on business and immigration for Georgia, or BIG Partnership, which is a statewide partnership to help foreign-born citizens more fully participate in our workforce and the surrounding economy. Joining us will be Darlene Lynch, Head of External Relations for this partnership, and our very own Daniela Perry, who will discuss the Georgia Chamber's efforts to ensure new Americans how they can participate fully in the Georgia economy. So we invite you to join us on August the 9th at 9 a.m. to learn more about how you can become involved in these efforts. And then on August the 25th, we'll have our next Max Academy workshop, which will be all about youth apprenticeships and other youth work experiences. We will hear success stories from one of our region's technical colleges and local workforce boards from the perspectives of both employers and youth. We hope that you can join us for these upcoming events. And again, want to thank our anchor investors and all of our members for making the work of Max possible. We thank each of you for joining us today and also making our efforts to serve through Max possible. We wish you the best for the remainder of your Friday and the weekend ahead, and we look forward to connecting with you again through Max. Take care, thank you, and goodbye.